the Hayden period, the first period that brought life. In the Proterozoic, it also brought life. In the Paleozoic, primitive life. But the Mesozoic was when the reptiles ruled Earth. And the Mesozoic was made into 3 periods: the Triassic, in the Jurassic, and finally, last but not least, the Cretaceous. And they all have one thing in common: dinosaurs. The Triassic was the first period of dinosaurs. Now, life was still primitive at the beginning, but it soon started to develop, and it got bigger and more complex. The flora of the Triassic period includes ferns. Now, ferns are still existing today, but they have a very ancient origin. They've been around for 350 million years. Ferns can be very, very, very small, or they can be very, very big, up to 25 feet tall. They reproduce by producing spores, and they have a pretty distinguishable image. They have leaves and a stem. There were also other fern-like plants. Plankton and other plants that photosynthesize can create oxygen for the earth, and phytoplankton was one of them. Phytoplankton have created a very good and strong bond with the oceanic food chain. Phytoplankton also helped the big dinosaurs that lived in the ocean at the time, like the Ichthyosaurus and the Plesiosaurs that lived at the time. Now, again, they have created a very crucial role in the aquatic food chain. In fact, a study by NASA called the NAME study was a 5-year program that lasted 5 years. This type of plant is called a pluriomia plant, and it could grow up to 2 meters high, and it did have needles similar to a pine tree of today. And the plant got thinner the higher it grew, and it mainly lived in Eurasia. And in the Permian early Triassic extinction event, it was the main plant that kind of dominated the floral ecosystem at the time. We're now entering the subtropical hemispheres of the planet. It looks a little different from today. Take a good look. The plants do look different. Forests, mainly in the subtropical hemispheres of the planet at the time, had some trees that were dominant in the forests that maybe the tropical region of the planet didn't. And those main trees that made up the forests were bennettitylines, conifers, and cycads. Bennettitylines had stout trunks and skinny branches branching out from the initial trunk. They came along in the early Permian period and survived the late Permian extinction event, but eventually they died out in the Cretaceous period. Conifers are still around today, and conifers are short for coniferous. They have been around for over 200 million years. And conifers come in many different kinds, too. They're Fraser firs, or just firs, that have slightly less sharp pine needles, and Other trees include sequoia trees and California redwood trees. And California redwood trees can easily get over 100 feet tall. Back in the Triassic period, some conifer trees could get over 100 feet tall. Some conifers also had pine cones. Cycads are also still alive today and have a stout trunk and are evergreen trees. At the top, the leaves circle around the trunk in a rosette-like fashion. Fossils of cycads identify them as being as old as the early Permian period, about 280 million years ago, or the late Carboniferous period, 300 to 325 million years ago. We are now getting to where we were before. Now this is what you wanted to see. Dinosaurs. This is the Eoraptor, a rather small dinosaur. In fact, all of the dinosaurs, or at least most of the dinosaurs in the Triassic period, were mainly small. The Eoraptor, compared to a human, can get as tall as 2 feet tall. And it can get as long as about 4.5 feet. That's very small, I know. That's about 3/4 the height of the average person's height of 6 feet in the US. So far, many discoveries of Eoraptor teeth have been different shapes, which means that this dinosaur could have been omnivorous. It is not known if the Eoraptor hunted in groups or not, but this Eoraptor was most likely a fast runner. There is also no main consensus on which color the Eoraptor was. Also, no one knows if it had feathers or not. It lived for about 5 million years in the late Triassic period, and it lived in western Gondwana. The Eoraptor weighed less than 22 pounds or 10 kilograms. The Eoraptor's full name is Eoraptor lunensis, and it lived in present-day Argentina and western Gondwana. The Coelophysis came in at up to 10 feet long and 3 feet high. The Coelophysis inhabited North America, and some remains have been found in Texas and even China. The Coelophysis lived near lakes and forests, and the dinosaur was carnivorous and ate reptiles and insects. Because of its small size, it had a very hard time eating other dinosaurs. The Coelophysis had phenomenal agility and speed, which is why the dinosaur is lightly built. The dinosaur could run up to 30 miles per hour. We last saw the Eoraptor in action, but sadly the Coelophysis and the Eoraptor didn't exist with each other. But the Coelophysis did live 215 to 205 million years ago. It had narrow hips, feet, and a tail, and its arms were adapted for grasping and killing prey. The Coelophysis had forward-facing eyes, which meant it had binocular vision, which is an easy way to tell if it is a predator or not, and it is a predator. Again, no one knows what general color the coelophysis was. The archosaur is everything from crocodilians to birds. Archosaurs were mainly crocodilian, quadrupedal, and had a long tail. Archosaurs could get to 10 feet to 16.6 feet in length. Archosaurs are a very broad classification of animals, with some being carnivores, herbivores, omnivores, and some even developing armor. An example of a herbivorous archosaur includes Chicxulub. Examples of armored archosaurs include Mambachaton and Ohana. Archosaurs were avian, aquatic, and land animals based on their less broader classification. Based on the rotation of the ankles, scientists classify archosaurs into different groups. Many different groups of Archosauria died out in the Triassic period. Again, archosaurs are everything from crocodiles to birds to dinosaurs to pterosaurs. Now for a quick size comparison. The dinosaurs of the Triassic period. A small Eoraptor comes in at 3.3 feet long, or a meter, and the large Eoraptor comes in at about 7 feet long. Then, the large Coelophysis comes in at around 10 feet long, with the huge Coelophysis coming in at around 11 feet long. Then comes the large Archosaur at 17 feet long, with the Archosaur being one of the biggest, if not the biggest, dinosaur of the Triassic period. All their different lengths are seen physically here. Again, here is the small Eoraptor, 3.3 feet long, or a meter, compared to the Archosaur, 17 feet long. Now, that is 5 times as big as the small Eoraptor. At this point, 230 million years ago, all of the landmass of the Earth accumulated into a C-shaped continent called Pangaea. Why the Triassic period is called the Triassic period is because of 3 rock layers that were formed during the period: red beds, limestone, and slate. What you see now is Bundsandstein, which is mainly exposed today in parts of Europe. Now, the color ranged from deep yellow to deep red, and it was made of sandstone. And sandstone is a sedimentary rock, so it had to be deposited somewhere. And that is how rock layers are formed. Because sandstone can be eroded so easily, it can create some very prominent shapes. Rocks and sediments were deposited onto a basin called the Germanic Basin, and that is how the Bundsandstein layer started. Bundsandstein is set up into 3 subgroups, called the lower, the middle, and the upper. The layer Bundsandstein can get up to a mile thick in some places. There's an archosaur. Then there's the middle muschelkalk, also called limestone. And this layer can be divided into 3 subgroups, like the Buntsandstein layer, and can reach 330 feet thick. Then there's the upper Kuiper layer. Now, this layer is composed of clay, shales, and even some dolomite. This layer has the richest amount of fossils from any layer from the Triassic period. Even some tree fossils have been discovered in this layer. The thickness of this layer can be as thin as 300 feet, or it can be as thick as 3,000 feet. The upper Kuiper is composed mainly of claystone, siltstone, sandstone, and also coal. And many, many fossils have been found in this layer. Then the middle Muschelkalk, which includes shell-bearing limestone and even some clay and other minerals. It can get up to 100 meters thick in some places. Then finally, the oldest layer of the Triassic period, the lower Buntsandstein. The lower Buntsandstein was composed mainly of colored sandstone with some other traces of other sedimentary rocks. It's 252 to 246 million years old. 25% of living things would be wiped out between the Triassic and the Jurassic period. Plants grew back, and everything went back online after the Permian extinction event for the majority of the Triassic. The Permian extinction was the biggest mass extinction in history. The Jurassic would give birth to many gigantic dinosaurs, including the sauropod Brachiosaurus. The breakup of Pangaea made many smaller continents that would eventually collide with each other, forming brand new mountains. The Andes Mountains and the Rocky Mountains in North America would be created in the Jurassic period. Many plant species made it through the Triassic and into the Jurassic, mainly because there is no record of any species of plants dying out in the Triassic-Jurassic extinction event. Conifer trees were the dominant tree in the Jurassic period, mainly because of the climatic change from very hot and dry all over the world to subtropical and humid all over the world. Because evergreen and conifer trees favor these conditions, it became the dominant tree of the period. The most dominant trees of this period include the ginkgo, the cycad, and the conifer. The dominant type of plant during this period were gymnosperms, or exposed seeded plants. A type of tree called metasequoias or dawn redwood could get up to 200 feet tall and originated in this period. Throughout the whole Jurassic period, all the plants that ruled the landscape were horsetails, ferns, ginkgos, conifers, and cycadophytes. Cone-shaped conifer trees also allowed for transportation of pollen during this period. The horsetail could reach a height of over 100 feet tall, becoming a large tree. The horsetail still exists today, with weeds being found all over the world, including North America, Europe, and the Middle East, and even some of Asia. The horsetail plant was green or brown in appearance and had rivets that were white colored going up the whole stem. Horsetail plants do not have flowers and do not carry seeds. Many different variations of the cycad came around in the Jurassic period. Cycads are seed plants with stout and woody stems and a crown of usually evergreen leaves. During the rock formation of the Jurassic, gold that would be mined during the gold rush of the 1800s would be created. Uranium would also be created. Overall, over the whole geologic history of the Jurassic, all rock layers are made out of sandstone, muds, and clays. All of them have their own tone of color that is special to that rock layer of the time. The oldest layer, seen at the bottom right there, is called the bottom Jurassic layer. In the western United States, the layer is made out of sandstone. This bottom Jurassic rock can be found in the popular Colorado Plateau and the Canyonlands and Capitol Reef National Park in Utah. The bottom layer is composed of many minerals, including calcium, zinc, and boron. In Europe, it's made out of slightly different materials, composed of siltstone, limestone, and colored clays. It gives the rock a brownish-white hue that you see here. The middle layer of the Jurassic was composed of red beds and sedimentary rock. The rock that it's composed out of is limestone, sandstone, and siltstone, like the bottom Jurassic, but with different formation processes. Middle Jurassic rock is also found exposed on the Colorado Plateau. Middle Jurassic rock is also found in Europe, like the Marble Formation in England, is made of some marble. This marble formation has a yellowish hue. The Upper Jurassic rock includes dolomites, shales, sandstone, and siltstone. Some of the Upper Jurassic layer rock can be found in Europe, especially in England. The Morrison Formation, found in the western United States, is where some Upper Jurassic rock can be found exposed in the United States. This formation is mainly found in Wyoming and Colorado and over 10 states. The thickness of this layer can get up to 660 feet thick. Coming in at an average of 21 feet long and 10 feet tall, the Stegosaurus is a quadrupedal herbivorous dinosaur. It lived about 160 to 150 million years ago. This dinosaur was armored and had 2 rows of spikes from its head all the way to the end of its tail. The spikes could get up to 2 feet tall, usually around the hip. These types of spikes, called bony cord scales, can be seen on lizards of today. The Stegosaurus ate cycads, ferns, and other plants and mosses. Even though the Stegosaurus was quite large, it might have had a few predators. The Allosaurus could have been a predator of the Stegosaurus. The Stegosaurus could weigh up to 7 tons or 14,000 pounds. It lived all over present-day Colorado and in some parts of Wyoming, Utah, and Oklahoma. The Stegosaurus is thought to only have a brain slightly bigger than a walnut, making many people think it is the dumbest dinosaur of all time. The Stegosaurus could probably walk at a maximum speed of 5 miles per hour. The Stegosaurus was usually a very docile animal, but if it had young, it was very protective of them. The Stegosaurus family is trying to find better feeding grounds. A gigantic forest lies at the other side of this small plateau. They need to get to it first, though. They plan to take a quick pit stop at the oasis on the plateau, but there's an archosaur waiting for them. The Stegosaurus stares the archosaur in the eye. Both of them know you don't want this fight. The archosaur lays off. Though the archosaur backed off, the Stegosaurus family will not be taking a pit stop at the oasis. The Stegosaurus family moves on. The Diplodocus was a quadrupedal herbivorous dinosaur. The Diplodocus lived about 160 to 145 million years ago. Fossils of the Diplodocus can be found in the Morrison Formation, centered in Colorado and Wyoming. The Diplodocus had a horizontal stance and might have been the biggest living thing to walk the planet. The Diplodocus could reach up to 100 feet long and, at the hip, could reach 15 feet tall. If its neck was fully extended up, perhaps to grab leaves from a high-growing tree, the Diplodocus's neck might have reached 50 feet off of the ground. The first Diplodocus fossil was discovered back in 1877. As seen here, the Diplodocus hallurum could reach up to 110 feet long and 20 feet tall at the hip. The Diplodocus ate leaves off of ginkgo and conifer trees, cycads, horsetails, and maybe even some meat. The Diplodocus could whip its tail up to 60 miles per hour. Though the Diplodocus was a walking giant, it could achieve speeds of up to 20 miles per hour. The Diplodocus usually walked at speeds of 5 to 9 miles per hour. If the Diplodocus did have any predators, it used its tail to defend itself. Its back legs were bigger than its front legs. The Diplodocus might have been able to stand on its hind legs. An adult Diplodocus did not have any natural enemies. The Allosaurus, growing as big as 39 feet long and 17 feet tall, the Allosaurus was a deadly predator to watch out for 155 to 145 million years ago. The Allosaurus and the Stegosaurus did live in the same time frame and in the same area, which means the Stegosaurus and the Allosaurus might have fought each other. Its name means different lizard because it was more on the unique side of dinosaur fossils with concave vertebrae. The Allosaurus was a large bipedal carnivorous theropod. There is no main consensus on the height or dominant color they were. The Allosaurus possibly fought in small groups and ate smaller dinosaurs. Despite being one of the largest theropods of the Jurassic period, it did have some predators. The biggest predator the Allosaurus might have had was the Torvosaurus, a 30-foot-long theropod with similar agility and intelligence to the Allosaurus. The Allosaurus lived in North America and Europe. There's a big fight about to break out. The tail of the Stegosaurus whipped at the Allosaurus's body so much it has marks of blood all over its body. It's in very bad shape. The Allosaurus favored semi-arid forest habitat with distinct wet and dry seasons. The Allosaurus was really built to rip open the flesh of a Stegosaurus. This is a quick size comparison of all the dinosaurs we've managed to catch on camera, Triassic and Jurassic periods together. Starting out with the small Eoraptor at 2 feet long and the large Eoraptor at 3.5 feet long. The Eoraptor was a very deadly predator that lived during the Triassic period. Coming up next is the average Coleophysis at 5 feet long. The Coleophysis was another deadly predator that lived during the Triassic period. Coming up, the large Archosaur, 17 feet long. An Archosaur can be everything from crocodiles to birds. The Archosaur was a very deadly predator that lived during the Triassic period. Now, the large Stegosaurus, 31 feet long. The Stegosaurus was literally built like a tank to handle fierce predators back in the Jurassic period. Next up, an intelligent, deadly theropod predator, the Allosaurus, coming in as large as 43 feet long. The Allosaurus lived with the Stegosaurus in the same time frame and in the same area, along with the Brachiosaurus. Coming up, possibly the biggest dinosaur of all time, the Diplodocus. On average, 88 feet long. At largest, 110 feet long. The Diplodocus was a herbivorous sauropod. All of these dinosaurs are dinosaurs that we know from the Triassic and Jurassic periods. But there are still hundreds of dinosaurs that we haven't discovered yet. This period marks the final period with dinosaurs. With warmer climate and more plants, the Cretaceous period was another massive growth spurt for the dinosaurs. The Tyrannosaurus rex, abbreviated as the T-Rex, came along during this period. The period lasted 145 to 65 million years ago and is the longest period of the Mesozoic. Velociraptors came along during the Cretaceous period. There is a chance that they traveled in groups. The flora of the Cretaceous period wasn't that much different from the Jurassic period except for one thing. During the Cretaceous period, the first flowering plants came about around 130 million years ago. By the end of the Cretaceous period, flowering plants became the dominant plant of the Cretaceous period. The main trees of the period included ginkgos, conifers, and cycads. The flowering plants of the Cretaceous period included chloranthaceae, rhosids, magnolids, and hydrangeas. We are not exactly sure how flowering plants came about. The flowering plants are not related to any gymnosperms or seed-producing plants that we know of. One big question is, why did the flowering plants explode and diversify so fast? It might be due to the overall warm climate of the Cretaceous period. This explosion and diversification of flowering plants even has its own name, called the Cretaceous Terrestrial Revolution, or KTR. Before the KTR, gymnosperms ruled the planet. These plants included ginkgos, conifers, bennettitales, and cycads. Ferns do not have flowers or seeds, but were still a dominant plant during the first half of the Cretaceous period. Many plants of the Cretaceous survived the infamous Chicxulub event, which happened 65 million years ago. Examples of some of these plants include ferns, flowering plants, and conifers. One of these plants, Moraceae, had lower classifications that included jackfruit, mulberries, and even figs. The Moraceae isn't a singular plant, it's a family of plants. Tulaceae is another type of plant that survived the Chicxulub event. In summary, most of the plants that were created during the Cretaceous period survived the Chicxulub event. The geology of the Cretaceous period has three big groups. These three rock layers included the Lower Cretaceous, Middle Cretaceous, and the Upper Cretaceous. Usually, the layers of rock are broken up into 12 different layers of rocks, all originating in Europe. Cretaceous rock layers from the United States can be found in northeastern Minnesota. The rocks formed were conglomerate, shale, limestone, and other deposited sediments of the Minnesota Formation known as the Coleraine Formation. You can also find fossils in the Coleraine Formation. Now, the dozen different rock layers from the Cretaceous period all found in Europe. The 12 different layers of the Cretaceous period are the Berriasian, Valaginian, Hauterivian, Biremian, Aptian, Albian, Cenomanian, Turonian, Coniacian, Samptonian, Campanian, and the Maastrichtian. We'll start out with the oldest rock layer formed during the Cretaceous period, the Berriasian. The Berriasian layer isn't a deep red, gray, or brown, it's more of a tan color. The Valanginian rock layer has amniote fossils and also some flowering plant fossils. The Valanginian rock layer was formed 140 million years ago to 132 million years ago. The third oldest layer is the Hauterivian layer. The rock layer was formed 132 to 125 million years ago. A short spurt of a mini ice age happened when this rock layer was being formed. Some evidence can even be found in the layer of rock. Many ammonite fossils are also found in this layer. The fourth oldest rock layer is the Birimian rock layer. The Birimian rock layer was formed 129 to 125 million years ago. The Birimian rock layer has many ammonite fossils and has a tan-like color. The fifth oldest rock layer of the Cretaceous is the Aptian layer. The Aptian rock layer formed 125 to 113 million years ago. The Aptian layer can be seen in many different formations located in Europe. The layer has a rich, deep and red-orange color in some places. The sixth Middle Age layer is the Albian layer. The Albian layer has a slightly bigger variety of fossils, including ammonites. Those are the first 6 layers of the Cretaceous period. The Cretaceous period is a very interesting period of history as far as geologic history goes. All of the rock layers previously discussed can be found all over Europe. As far as the Cretaceous rock in the United States goes, the Minnesotan Coleraine Formation is your best bet for finding Cretaceous age rock in the United States. Coming in at 6 feet long, the Velociraptor lived 75 to 71 million years ago. The Velociraptor got up to 100 pounds and 1.6 feet high at the hips. It lived up to 20 years old. The Velociraptor was intelligent for a dinosaur that size. It was about as smart as the modern bird. The Velociraptor did have some predators, with some being Alioramus and large troodontids. The Velociraptor was able to sprint up to 25 miles per hour. The Velociraptor is usually thought to have hunted in packs, but this is unlikely. The Velociraptor is very similar to the Dinosaurs, which most likely did hunt in packs. Because the Velociraptor and the Deinonychus get mixed up, it was thought that the Velociraptor did hunt in packs, but this is very unlikely. The Velociraptor lived in Eastern and Central Asia and deserts with trees and rivers. The Velociraptor had feathers on its back and feathers that drooped from its arms. Intelligence. The intelligence of a Velociraptor has been exaggerated, and examples include Jurassic Park. The Velociraptor had the intelligence of a modern bird. The smartest dinosaur that ever lived, the Troodon, was also as smart as a bird. Fossils. Fossils of the velociraptor have been found in Mongolia, China, and even Alberta, Canada. More than a dozen fossils of the velociraptor have been discovered, including heads, rib cages, and claws. One complete skeleton of the velociraptor has it fighting a protoceratops mid-battle. The velociraptor had a long tail and a green and yellow plumage. It had feathers running down its tail and up its back, and claws that were used for digging into the flesh of its prey. Coming in at 30 feet long and up to 13 tons, the Triceratops lived 68 to 66 million years ago. The Triceratops had a parrot-like beak and had 3 horns. The Triceratops was herbivorous, and it walked on 4 legs, and it lived in western North America. Fossils of the Triceratops have been found in Saskatchewan, North Dakota, and Wyoming. The Triceratops ate fruits, roots, leaves, and seeds. The Triceratops got up to 10 feet tall. The Triceratops is a dinosaur under the Ceratopsian classification. Its frill could get up to 3 feet high. The Triceratops could sprint up to 20 miles per hour. The frill of a Triceratops could have served as a weapon, or it could have been used for dominance over others. The first Triceratops fossil was discovered in 1887 by the capital of Colorado. With its huge head, scientists have wondered if it could bear the weight of its head, with the front legs walking far apart from each other. The Triceratops walked similarly to the rhinoceros. The Triceratops might have lived in family groups. Because of the sheer weight of its head, it mainly fed on vegetation growing from the ground. The skin of the Triceratops had large scales. The Triceratops had over 800 teeth and grew new ones throughout its life. The frill of a Triceratops might have even been used to regulate body temperature. The Triceratops did have a predator though, and that was the Tyrannosaurus rex is the most popular dinosaur of all time. This bipedal carnivore lived in North America, Australia, and even Asia. The Tyrannosaurus had scaly skin and did not have feathers. Size. The Tyrannosaurus got up to 50 feet long and 15 to 20 feet high. It weighed 5 to 9 tons. The Tyrannosaurus was one of the biggest bipedal carnivores. Intelligence. It had an intelligence similar to that of the modern crocodile. It had a brain 12.5 ounces in weight. Diet. The diet of a Tyrannosaurus included small dinosaurs, Triceratops, and Anatosaurus. It was a cannibal, as it did eat others of its kind. This unlucky Triceratops will now have to engage in battle with the T-Rex. The Tyrannosaurus Rex won this battle. The Tyrannosaurus was an opportunistic scavenger and an active hunter. If it saw something dead, it would eat it. This Tyrannosaurus has won a great meal. A full-grown Triceratops will tide him over for a long time. Nothing can kill it. Nothing, right? 65 million years ago, a 6-mile-wide asteroid came and hit Earth. It would land in the Yucatan Peninsula and would destroy all dinosaurs. Coming in at 3.5 feet long, the small Eoraptor lived during the Triassic period. Next up, the 6-foot-long average Coelophysis. It also lived during the Triassic period. Up next, the 6.8-foot-long average Velociraptor. This dinosaur was a fierce carnivore that lived during the Cretaceous period. Next up, the large Archosaur, 17 feet long. These animals evolved before the dinosaurs. The 30-foot-long large Stegosaurus. The Stegosaurus was a herbivore and lived during the Jurassic period. Next up, the 31-foot-long large Triceratops. It had 3 horns and a frill and was a herbivore that lived during the Cretaceous period. The 40-foot-long large Allosaurus. This dinosaur was a fierce carnivore that lived during the Jurassic period. Up next, the 50-foot-long large Tyrannosaurus Rex. Its name means Tyrant Lizard King. Up next, possibly the biggest dinosaur of all time. The 150-foot-long large Diplodocus. The Eoraptor compared to the Diplodocus. The asteroid is advancing through space. We don't know how much energy was released from the blast. It might have been equivalent to 100 teratons of TNT. Many things died during the Chicxulub event, but some creatures did survive. Everything that died included 75% plant and animal life. This asteroid was not the only reason why the dinosaurs died out. For thousands of years before the Chicxulub event, volcanic activity in present-day India expelled poisonous gases and ash all over the world. After the asteroid impacted the Earth, a lot more life would die. The amount of rock expelled into the atmosphere was immense. The rock came back down as a meteor shower, with thousands of little pieces raining all over the globe. This spread poisonous gases all over the world. Then, a 2.8-mile high tsunami made it to many coastlines across the globe. Upon hitting land in present-day United States, the tsunami was 70 to 100 feet high. Almost all coastlines of South America, North America, and even Africa had been affected by the tsunami. The asteroid would create a 110-mile wide and 12-mile deep crater. The crater is now buried 2/3 of a mile underground by sedimentary rock. Some species and other creatures and plants survived. Sea turtles and other marine life like coral, fish, and small cells survived. Crocodilians, snakes, and lizards also survived. Some dinosaurs did survive. Bird-like dinosaurs were the only dinosaurs that survived. The Ichthyornis was a bird from the Cretaceous period that survived. Slowly, the ecosystem started to get back in shape again. Then, rodents and other mammals took over. Until now, finally, after all this time, we came about.